This happened when I was 13 years old, right after finishing 6th grade. Summer vacation had just begun, and that was when everything unfolded. It was the mid-1960s. My father was serving in the US Navy, and we lived in Charleston, South Carolina, not far from a major naval base. The city was full of military families. That summer, I was supposed to leave for a military summer camp near Myrtle Beach, where children of service members went every year. I had been dreaming about hiking trails, sleeping in tents, sitting by a blazing campfire at night, singing songs, and eating baked potatoes wrapped in foil. Instead, I ended up in an infectious disease ward with scarlet fever. They placed me in a small isolation wing attached to the main hospital building. At the time, I was the only patient there. The loneliness alone was heavy enough. But what made it worse was the fact that the city morgue stood not far from the hospital grounds. My room was on the 2nd floor, a small ward with 2 beds. At the head of the beds was a window. At the foot, a door with a glass panel in its upper half. Outside that door was a landing with a wooden staircase leading down to the 1st floor. The first night of my solitary confinement was beginning. It was around 10 o'clock when a nurse came in, checked on me, wished me good night, and turned off the lights. I lay down. The bed stood against the wall. To my left was the window, slightly open, letting in the warm scent of a southern summer night that pushed away the sterile hospital smell. A thin curtain shifted gently in the draft. Outside, the darkness was thick and complete, alive with the steady hum of cicadas. And yet, sleep would not come. I lay there wide awake. The room was suffocating, thick, heavy air still holding the heat of the day. My thoughts circled endlessly. I turned from side to side, and the sagging metal springs beneath me creaked with every movement. From time to time, I glanced at the door, more precisely, at the glass panel in its upper half. It stood out sharply against the pale surface of the door, lit by the single bulb on the stair landing outside. Then suddenly, a shadow crossed the glass. Someone was standing there. I lifted my eyes and froze. Behind the glass stood a devil, a real one, exactly the way they are drawn in storybooks and imagined in our minds. About my height, maybe 5 feet tall, covered in coarse hair, long donkey-like ears rising from its misshapen head, 2 small horns between them, a pig's snout, a pointed goat's beard, and behind it, slowly swaying, a thin tail with a tuft at the end. It stood only a few yards away, staring at me with glowing red eyes, and I stared back. To say I was afraid would be an understatement. The air in the room was heavy and humid, yet from that creature came a wave of icy cold so sharp it sent a chill straight through my body. Fear crept inside me, slowly, relentlessly, filling every part of me. My temples pounded. Panic tightened around my chest. My father, a career Navy officer, had taught me since childhood to stand firm. If you're knocked down, fight on your knees. If you can't stand, crawl, but move forward. And in that moment, I understood. I had to act. I couldn't just lie there. With a surge of will, I jumped out of bed and rushed toward the door. The devil twisted its face into a grimace and vanished. I threw the door open. No one there. I listened. Silence. I bolted down the wooden staircase. Empty. I ran outside onto the porch and stopped. In the darkness, 2 hospital orderlies dressed in white were carrying a body on a stretcher, covered with a sheet. They were heading toward the morgue. There was no one else. only the relentless hum of cicadas and the thick blackness of the night. My legs felt weak, and I sank down onto the porch step. I sat there for a while until the orderlies returned from the morgue. One of them looked at me and said, "Kid, get back to your room." I went back to my room. Sleep was out of the question. I dragged the second bed against the door like a barricade. I covered the glass panel with a blanket from the empty bed, and I sat there until morning, until a young nurse arrived with a thermometer. She couldn't get the door open at first and was clearly annoyed when she finally stepped inside, asking why I had turned the room upside down. I didn't tell her anything. I decided there was no point. She was young. She wouldn't understand. She might laugh and think I had imagined the whole thing. And a reputation like that can stick to you for a long time. After she left, I dozed off briefly before the morning rounds. Later that day, my grandmother came to visit. To her, I told everything. About the devil at the door, about the body the orderlies carried toward the morgue. My grandmother was a deeply religious woman. As I spoke, she kept crossing herself and whispering, "Lord, have mercy." When I finished, she said a prayer and made the sign of the cross in every corner of the room, over the window and the door. Then she sat quietly for a while thinking. Finally, she offered her explanation. In her view, a great sinner must have died that night, and the devil had come to claim his soul, walking ahead, clearing the path to hell, and on the way, he had looked in on me. To be honest, I didn't agree with every part of her explanation, especially the idea that anyone needed a path cleared to hell. But I didn't argue. That was the first time I truly wondered whether adults tell us everything about how this world works. Before that, I had heard stories about devils, read them in books. They always felt like fiction. But after that night, I understood something differently. If evil exists, then good must exist too. If there is a hell, there must also be a heaven. And one of those places waits for every person, every single one. And it is up to each of us where we end up. That was the only experience like that in my life. I have never seen anything like it again. Though life has placed me in many strange situations since then, and more than once, death seemed to come very close. But it seems my time had not yet come.